Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Akili's webcast on business process mapping and modeling, part 2 of our BPM webcast series. My name is Sean Granfield, and I'm a member of the sales team here at Akili, and I'm looking forward to sharing our insights with you over the next 45 minutes on business process management. We believe that the way in which companies manage the business process and the people-related elements of a project is a critical component of technology implementations, and Akili has been addressing this for over 20 years. Today we want to introduce you to our BPM leaders and share the Akili approach to BPM, specifically the business process mapping and modeling phase. So before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. All participants will be muted for the duration of the call. If you'd like to communicate with the panelists, please use the on-screen chat panel. We'll be monitoring that for your feedback as we go. You can also submit your questions in the chat panel at any time during the presentation. We'll handle all questions together at the end of the session, but you're welcome to enter them at any time. We'll also be recording today's session. We'll post the recorded session on our website if you'd like to review it again afterwards, or if you'd like to share it with someone in your organization, which we highly encourage you to do. Now moving on, we have our agenda for today. I'll start off with an introduction of our guest speakers, Mark Butler and Mark Freeman, followed by a brief overview of Akili. We will then lay out the guiding principles for consistently reaping the benefits of a real process optimization that can only be achieved through the hard work of highly productive business process mapping and modeling. We have allocated time at the end to discuss how we can engage with you around your current or future BPM needs, along with the Q&A we spoke about earlier. We also have 2 upcoming webcasts on additional BPM education and awareness that I'll share at the end. Now for our speaker introductions. Our esteemed speakers today are Mark Butler and Mark Freeman. Mark Butler possesses a broad range of industry experience over nearly 30 years, focused in the arena of business process management, tightly coupled with organizational and cultural change management. He has been guiding companies and helping them raise the bar of performance in their key business processes, as evidenced by an impressive array of engagements with companies such as BNSF Railway, Southwest Airlines, and American Airlines. Mark Freeman has over 22 years experience in information technology related engagements, with the last 12 years focused on business transformation, organizational effectiveness, business process reengineering, and organizational and cultural change management. Mark's experience includes projects with companies like BP, Harman, ConocoPhillips, and many more. Now a little bit about our company, Akili. I'll turn it over to these gentlemen in just a few minutes, but I want to make sure everybody understands who we are as a company and where we're coming from. Akili is a Dallas-based consulting firm founded in 1992 with locations in Houston and Denver, as well as our home base here in Dallas. Oftentimes we get asked where the name Akili comes from, and as you can see here, it means knowledge in Swahili. Now for over 20 years, Akili has been providing knowledge in the form of exceptional IT services to our clients. Our goal is to empower our clients to compete like never before. We ensure our clients receive the best combination of technology and consulting services to achieve that end. If you note the triangle logo for Akili, it refers to the balance of people, technology, and process. Akili delivers a better result by aligning the process and the people with technology, and that's our main topic today. Akili provides end-to-end services starting with establishing the vision for desired future state. We work with our clients to implement technology and process improvements to reach their desired state. Whether it is a new technology implementation, an enterprise-wide transformation, or a process change, we facilitate strong user adoption. We help our clients manage their IT environments through our application managed services, or AMS. As well as our support offerings. We also assist with optimizing the value to their organization from the technology or process improvements they make. We deliver solutions in ERP and the office of the CFO. We specialize in all aspects of data integration, conversion, and governance, from data warehousing to information management, and across all of our services we include our methodology components of BPM, which you'll learn more about today. We also engage with our clients in BPM efforts that may not be associated specifically with technology deployments. Now with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Mark Butler.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be with you, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us on the webcast today. Now, we want to quickly transition from this strategic service model that Sean just shared with you to the execution and delivery of BPM at the project level. Today, we will only be touching on aspects of BPM delivery under the implement phase of this model. We're going to peel the next layer of the onion in terms of detail and take a closer look at this process mapping and modeling phase. Now, don't worry, We're not going to treat this like a training class. So our objective is simply to give you just enough additional detail beyond what we shared in our first webcast to give you a reasonable idea of how we go about this important activity of process improvement and how this approach can be of real benefit to you. Now, before we do that, for those of you who may have missed the first webcast, we probably should take just a minute and provide a little bit of context and catch you up on how we get started in our BPM work during the vision phase with our clients. We introduced this capability maturity model last week. Some or most of you will be familiar with this capability maturity model, or CMM. It came out of the software development industry, and it's been adapted for BPM services practice. One of the first things we like to do when we begin working with a client is to help them identify where they are today along this path to BPM maturity and sophistication. And then we talk about where they need to be or where they want to be in order to meet the challenges or eliminate the challenges that are getting in the way of them meeting their business goals. Now, so one of the key outcomes is then we can help our clients build a plan that will move them from where they are to where they want to be. Now, for today, we're going to assume that we're down here at level 1 or level 2 someplace. That implies that there is a need for process mapping and modeling work. Now, based on years of experience with past client engagements, we've learned that more than a few people have had some less than desirable experiences with this work of business process mapping and modeling. They've either been the unwitting victims of very boring or unproductive process mapping sessions, or some of the folks have even told us that they participated in the workshops, but nothing really ever changed. They never saw any results. Or the deliverables that come from those workshops or that effort were not really useful to them, or even worse, they never saw any artifacts from the work at all. Now, of course, when stuff like that happens, people are going to lose their trust in approaches like these to process optimization. And that's truly unfortunate, because current state and future state process mapping is absolutely an essential element in any process improvement effort. And because it is essential, we need to be able to do it real well. Okay, so let's take a look at how we execute so we're all on the same page.
Okay, so we introduced this graphic in our first webcast, but we had it simplified a bit for the executive level briefing. Today, we're disclosing all 6 of the separate steps involved in the blueprint phase, so you get a clear picture of the work that's required to do a full and complete business process improvement. Now, in this webcast, we're going to focus right here on the first step of as-is process mapping. This step also includes the work of modeling or documenting the results in a process mapping tool. And in our case, we're using Visio. Here's what we consider to be the essential ingredients to successful process mapping workshops. First of all, we use structured and facilitated workshops, during which we lead our clients, hopefully a cross-functional group of SMEs, through the process mapping activity that's typically between 2 and 4 hours in duration, and in which we call guided discovery. We can do 1 or 2 sessions per day, depending on SME availability and depending on process complexity. It's our responsibility to create the ideal and safe environment in which our client SMEs have the best opportunity to, first of all, disclose all the steps in their business processes, and where they'll feel encouraged to identify and frankly discuss gaps in performance, and also where they're able to be very creative in identifying and defining the solutions to these gaps. Now, these workshops are one of the most important organizational change management activities that we do in our BPM engagements, because this type of collaborative experience greatly enhances organizational adoption and usage. Now, let's talk about the tools and techniques that we use. First of all, we use a simple set of color-coded tools in order to capture the steps of a business process. Also, these colors are very significant and have specific meaning that we're going to explain in the next few slides. And the results of this need to tell a very clear story. Our goal is that even an 8th grader, for example, can read and understand the process story. And finally, we feel that this work must be fun and engaging to be successful. If not, the people aren't going to engage well, and their contribution is going to suffer.
So we capture the steps in the business processes during our mapping sessions using these rather large 6 by 8 inch 3M Post-it notes. These are called meeting notes. You have to buy these online. You can't typically find these in stores. Because they're relatively large pieces of paper, we can write on these with nice flip chart markers, and people sitting 15 to 20 feet away can read them quite comfortably. Let me explain the color coding that we use and help you understand why it's relevant. First of all, we use the pink cards and we map them in Visio using red to identify the process trigger events and to identify the process outcomes. So some trigger starts the process, and it can have one or more outcomes depending on, what things happen inside the process. Next, we on the orange cards, we map the manual steps. 3M quit including the blue cards in the decks for some reason, so orange is our option that we use when we map it in the session. We still map it in blue inside of Visio because the contrast works better. The yellow cards we use to identify system-assisted steps. Now these are steps where someone's using a computer to either do data entry, to run reports, to do inquiries of any kind, right? And then finally, we use the green Post-it notes to identify automagic steps, things that happen in the middle of the night, batch processing, or things that start based on a clock, right? Now, the next thing is we capture the action that is performed in each step of the process, and to do that, we use an action verb to begin the description of the action. This tells us the what is being done. Now, being consistent in that practice is super important, although it may seem kind of trivial to anybody at this point. This simple technique helps us ensure that we stay focused on someone doing something in a specific way, and it helps us ensure that we create the very simple, understandable story that we're looking for, as Mark explained it to you. I'm going to show you an example of this here in just a minute. We also record in this bottom left-hand corner in a green marker the role or the actor who performs that task. This adds to the what. Now we have who is doing it. On the other corner, in red marker, we write down the tool or the system that the actor uses to perform that step. This now adds the how. So we've got the what, the who, and the how on a single 6 by 8 inch card. And we also use a variety of other smaller size Post-it notes, either 3 by 3 or 4 by 4, for mapping out things like, for example, branching in the process and annotating edit loops. We also need to identify delays in the process where the workflow comes to a halt pending some event that gets it all going again. And we also want to identify anywhere we find gaps in performance and then opportunities for making improvements. These gaps and opportunities are also captured on flip charts so we can catalog them for research and discussion later on in the analysis phase. And finally, we may need or want to capture some additional comments, notes, details about a particular step in the process. So there's no way we can cover all the process facilitation techniques that are needed to make these workshops successful. However, we do offer an entire training class on facilitating these workshops whenever you're ready to start building your internal capabilities for doing them. Okay, so said we're going to show you an example, and here they are. When you look at these two examples, you can't really read them very well right now, and I'm going to blow those up in a second. But you notice the example on the left. You see lots of yellow and green. So you'd say that's a fairly automated process. And one over here on the right has got a lot of orange. So that says, well, that's a pretty manual process, right? So if it's automated, it ought to be wonderful. Well, as it turns out, that automated process wasn't so good. And in fact, this particular map right here is the heart of the problem the client called us to help them resolve. And what we've got here is actually two processes. The first one starts here. It is the position request approval, and it starts with the position vacancy occurs. That starts the process. And it immediately branches. This other branch down here, it's actually mapped on another piece of paper. But that process runs down this way and turns the corner and comes back and ends down here with the result of the position created. And notice the pink Post-it notes are used for that. And the other process has two different triggers, and it runs down here, drops down, and comes back and ends up with the assignment created. All right? So let me just drill in just a little bit so you guys can see this, and we're going to start showing you. So this first step, obviously, is system assisted. It is the department admin is filling out or entering to create a new position. Okay? And an email alert is automatically sent to the department head, who reviews that position and will either approve or reject it. If it's rejected, a notice of that rejection goes back, and here's where we're branching from B, comes back to B, and they go back and fill it out again. That was one of the weaknesses we found in the process, that rejection killed the request and they had to redundantly retype it. So let's say that it's approved. The email, if they approve it, an email alert is sent on to the next approver. That goes to the provost, and they review and approve, reject, same story, comes back, or it goes on. If it's approved, an email alert is sent to the budget office, and they're going to review it and go verify that the funds for that position exist in the accounting system, but it's a separate system. And if they reject it, again, the same problem happens where it kills the request and the poor person has to retype it again. That was causing all kinds of problems. If things are good, then they approve it. The approval alert is then sent to the HR department, where they will go through this pile of requests, select each one of them, review them for issues, and notice this is orange, meaning this is a manual process. If something in the request is not complete, which unfortunately could be the case, they have to call up and manually solve that problem, okay? So notice the action verbs that we had talked about. We've got fill out, review, again, review, verify, reject, approve, select and review, create position, update. So we're very consistently using that scheme to identify the actor does what in what with using what tool. Okay? So that's the first one. Let's go look at this other one over here. This is a big process. Notice it's got 37 steps. Now that's important. Here in a minute we're going to talk about, you can't get 37 steps on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in Visio very well. So we're going to talk about process decomposition. So this process, again, looks very manual. Again, we've labeled it. It's got a label. It's faculty recruiting. The hiring prep is complete, and then someone fills out an applicant recruiting form. That's done in the HR employment group using some system. That will automatically publish this position to the web. Within 7 to 14 days, a bunch of applicants will come, and they will submit applications and attach documents like their resume, the curriculum vitae, their credentials, letters of reference, and things like that. Then, when they do that, the search committee is able to pull up those records and review that applicant list. They'll pick an applicant and then look at the associated documents, and they'll determine if they're qualified. And if they are, they're going to do an applicant pre-screen on the phone. If that works out, they fill out an on-campus interview request form. That's a piece of paper. Then they fill out another piece of paper. Very manual process, right? They're going to fill out a criminal background check request form. And then they'll give that to a Pony Express writer who delivers it over to the employment group. They'll review that request and then fill out a form on a website based on that criminal background check form that they were sent. And within about 3 days, they get a notice that it was either good or bad, and then they will review those results to find out whether it was good or bad. If it's good, they will email the approval to proceed back to the selection committee in the department, and they'll schedule the interview. If there's travel involved, they make travel arrangements. If not, they just skip and wait, and then they do the interview, okay? So again, notice how these steps are working and how we're consistently capturing who is doing what in what way, all right? And we consistently do that. Submit, review, determine, pre-screen, fill out, deliver, submit, okay? And again, this is 37 steps, and we're going to talk about why that's a problem here in a minute.
So then, now that you have the process map on the wall that Mark just demonstrated, the question is, how do you transform this raw product into an artifact that you can use to do good, solid, meaningful process analysis? Well, this leads us to the work of process modeling, or how to document the results captured in your process mapping and discovery workshops. We believe that many people's distrust or lack of confidence in business process mapping, modeling, and analysis as a method is due in large measure to the fact that either, first of all, the workshops aren't well facilitated, highly productive, and fun events, or the deliverables from the work are simply not useful to the common person, whether they're frontline employees, software developers, or business executives. So we place a very high premium on both how the workshops are run and the practical short and long-term usefulness of the resulting artifacts.
So we begin with the end in mind. In other words, what do you want that end result to do for you? What will make that artifact useful to the people in the organization? One of the primary challenges with turning that raw product into this rich, useful artifact is understanding how to arrange, organize, and model the process in such a way that it meets these criteria. First, it must be published and readable online. It has to be easily accessible by anybody in the organization. It has to be easily understood and followed. Again, the 8th grader test. We want to use business terms, avoiding technobabble, and being very consistent with action verbs to describe someone doing something in a specific way so that it's no question what is going on in that step. Next, it needs to be pretty, visually compelling, and clean. If the process map is a mess and jumble of lines going in all kinds of different directions, and some processes are complex, then it becomes difficult for people to consume it. And if it's difficult to consume, they're not going to use it. It also has to be easily printed on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. There is one exception with one of our artifacts. They're called system context diagrams. And those things can be rather large, as in 11 by 17, or even need to be plotted on a plotter. And when we say it has to be printed on 11 by 8.5 by 11, we're not talking about reducing the thing by 50% in order to give it to fit, so they have to use a magnifying glass. That doesn't count. In addition, these artifacts should help the organization create the end-user acceptance testing processes and artifacts, and it should also be very useful in end-user training and in online reference materials. As you can see, process documentation should have a very high value quotient, for lack of a better term. If people would consistently get this kind of stuff from this work, we think it'd be pretty easy to get them to participate. Now, we feel that if your process modeling and documentation doesn't meet this criteria, you'll have missed a scarce opportunity, maybe even poisoned the water hole, and you'll only end up creating shelfware that nobody is ever going to use. Now, I mentioned process decomposition a minute ago. We have found this metaphor of boulders, rocks, pebbles, sand, dust to be very helpful in calibrating the expectation of our client SMEs with respect to level of detail and when we're at one level and when we need to be at another. It works really well. Clearly, these words and these images represent a progression of granularity from large to very small, and it nicely illustrates this decomposition problem we've got to deal with. This technique enables us to get to the details that are below the surface of people's general awareness for any given business process. So think about an iceberg. What portion is above the line? What portion is below the line? The boulders and rocks of processes are fairly well understood by almost everybody in the organization. Yeah, we know we do invoicing. We send out bills. We pay bills. We take orders. Everybody knows that. What they don't know is the problems that are below the surface. They are hidden in the detailed steps, and that requires patience, energy, and skills. And if we do not have the patience, energy, and skills to do that work, there's really very little chance we're going to make any significant improvement in the business process. The pebbles level is, the pebbles represent the individual steps in the business process. Now here we are at someone doing something in a specific way, as I've described earlier, right? This is the level of detail in our business process maps. We get to the sand and dust level during our process analysis stage of the methodology, and we'll discuss that in our next webcast.
So we want to document the map. So it fits on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So let's talk about that. Now we can only get about 15 to 20 at the most steps of the process on one page, provided there are only a couple of simple departmental handoffs. Now in the example that you see here, let's take note of a few things. Realistically, we only fit 5 swim lanes at the most on one page, period. That's only if it's a very simple and straightforward line process. It doesn't include edit or review and approval route. Generally, 4 swim lanes is the most we'll be able to get on a page given a process of ordinary and typical complexity. So we have to figure out how to chunk the whole process into sub-processes. Now clearly we want the chunks to feel natural, meaning the story needs to make sense. You don't want to feel it oddly contrived. And additionally, we want to be able to label each sub-process with a title that's a very logical and scripted container for all the steps included in it.
So now we're going to show you, we're going to basically demonstrate what Mark and I've been describing for the last couple of slides. First, what we want to show you is how we model in Visio. Now again, this is not about Visio per se. We're not selling Visio, and we're not in a training class. Our objective is to speak to the value and concept of using a template file, having a template file for standards across your organization, and the benefit of using the process modeling stencil with predefined shapes and colors. Then we'll show you the process decomposition or navigation that lets us drill down and drill around in the resulting artifact. Now these techniques help speed up the work of process documentation. It will drive artifact consistency across process, and it'll make the artifacts come alive and have value for the consumer. The second thing we want to demo is an example of the published process model, the finished product. So you can see what it looks like and how you can navigate around through it. And you will also see how this finished product illustrates the benefits of our process modeling standards that we discussed a few minutes ago, okay? So I'm going to click on this little shape right there, and this will pop open Visio. This will open our process mapping stencil to the home page right here. What you'll see is it's already got a page frame on it that is one big swim lane. We've got a header up here so that when you name the document, it's going to appear right down here. This header up there is something you edit. It'll always have the date that was saved, and you can update the version number over time if you want to keep track of versions. We also provide a place to put some narrative and some just explanation information to the consumers. Across the bottom, we have some standard buttons that navigate to the legend, to the version notes, a parking lot, a gap and opportunity statement if you want to keep track of it here, or you can keep track of it in and connect this link to a, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. Across the top, I've got an example of a high-level process model. This is the boulders level of the process, right? And I can click in on this and drill in. So here provides the navigation. Now we drop down to the rocks level. This is This is the chunking of the business process. So let's say, think back. I showed you a map a minute ago that had 37 steps. They won't fit on this page, so we got to bust them up into like 3 chunks, right? And we can drill in again. And now I'm at the pebbles level. Someone doing something in a specific way. Step, 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 right? Here's 1 swim lane, 2nd swim lane, 3rd swim lane, and we can navigate back up here. Okay, I'm going to drill down to this next one. Now this one's incomplete, so I'm going to go ahead and pop open the process mapping stencil. It's under more shapes, my shapes, and here we go. Now you can see over here that our stencil has a lot of shapes and colors on it, so it's fairly rich. It's ready to go, and we can simply just take those steps and drag them onto the process model, right, and connect those things up fairly quickly. I'll just add a couple here. Let's say we want to add a new swim lane. You just grab the swim lane and you pop it on here. Yes, there's other ways to do this. Again, not Visio training. So we'll just add another step down here. Very quickly, you can start building your process map out. So this lets us, again, have a consistent way and methodology for process documentation. In addition to this, right here, let me show you. We also include in the map, in this template, some examples. Here's a high-level map. Here's another way to map something that might be a lot of detail, right? So this is one example. Give you another page. So this is just, we just provide people with a few examples of some process mapping so that they can have a sense for how that might, what things that they might be able to do. Okay? So I'm gonna close that. So there we go. That's how we map it in Visio. There's a bunch of rules around, you know, what works and doesn't work. Let's look at what the finished product will look like, and I'm going to show you the finished product of that process that had 37 steps. All right, in this documentation, we include the as-is and the to-be model so we can do the comparison side by side. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's drill into the as-is process and go look at this faculty recruiting. So we chunked those 37 steps into 3 chunks. So the first part was applicant pre-screen and criminal background check. An 8th grader can read that, applicant pre-screen and criminal background check, except they got to know the acronym. And they know what that means. Applicant, interview, and verbal offer. Applicant, formal offer, and acceptance. Those are pretty clear, right? So let's drill in. So the first, notice how many steps are in here. One of the things we find is when we map in Visio, the process actually grows in the number of steps beyond what was on the wall, because there's things that you kind of overlook on the wall mapping experience. So we drill in, and there's your steps. 3 swim lanes, a lot of steps. Let's look at the next one. That one's the very manual portion of the process. And over here, formal acceptance, right? Now I told you, we have a side-by-side. So if I click this icon right here, that's the current manual process. That's what it would be if we automated it. Before, after. Let's go to the second step. You click on it, that's the before, and here's the after. As you can see, we proposed a significant and major automation of this big business process. Okay? So hopefully that gives you an idea of what the finished product looks like. Okay? With that, I'm going to turn the time back over to Sean, and he'll handle the next steps in our Q&A.
That's great. Thank you, Mark Butler and Mark Freeman. Now, before we go to Q&A, I do want to speak about how Akili will engage with all of you, no matter where you are in your BPM journey. It's all going to start with a BPM advisory call, and Akili is offering all of our registered attendees today a free 30-minute advisory session for you and your team to discuss with us where you are with your BPM program and ultimately where you'd like to be. This meeting is meant to provide a springboard for a more in-depth conversation about where you are with BPM as an organization. And now we're going to move on to some Q&A. So we've been looking at the questions as they've been coming in, and the first one is really quite apt for what we're talking about here. And Mark, can you help some of our attendees understand what is the nature of the 30-minute consultation call or advisory call, I should say?
That's a good question. It's pretty straightforward. It's mostly us listening to you. We do have a set of questions that we will ask to kind of frame things up, but it's just us asking questions and listening to you what we're looking to do is to identify your BPM hotspots. These would be aspects of BPM that may be causing you some challenges or that you're struggling with or are preventing you from achieving your business goals. The desired outcome of that call is to develop a list of targeted topics that we would then want to come and address with you face-to-face in like a half-day discovery session where we would dig into that a little bit more and kind of map out how Akili could help you in that journey towards BPM.
Got it. No, that sounds great, Mark. Thank you. And another one that came in, what are the biggest challenges of implementing a BPM strategy based on
Yeah, Sean, that's a good question, and it's one we need to address because BPM strategy is important. So we have about 4 critical success factors that we look at when we talk about challenge. First of all is sponsorship. It's essential to have an informed, active, and I underline active, powerful and dedicated sponsor from the execution suite or executive suite. Now, we have experience before we call a black hole sponsor. We don't need that because that's a sponsor that just appears initially and then seems to fade away. So we continuously coach our sponsors so that doesn't happen. Now, the sponsor must truly care about and believe in the real financial benefits of a culture of BPM. Also, another challenge is a basic plan. You need a basic plan. It can be very informal, even if it's on the back of a napkin. You need at least a rudimentary plan for going forward and moving ahead. You don't need to over-engineer this scope. Also, a basic methodology is important. Again, you can't expect to make much progress at all if you don't follow a sound approach to the work. And again, you don't have to over-engineer this, but a basic methodology is important. Obviously, we have one that we can replicate. Also, and finally, some professional assistance is needed. Now, you're going to need some resources who are armed with skills to teach, to guide, to mentor, and challenge your internal team. And I underline the word challenge there because that's important. It brings us to the need for an internal resource. The journey will require some internal resources or internal resource that has and can acquire the needed level of competency and assistance to succeed. And we can provide that skill set for you, or we can help you facilitate that skill set, or even help you identify the individual that's got that skill set. So those are our biggest challenges when we talk about BPM strategy.
Yeah, no, that makes great sense, and thank you, Mark. And then there's one more, and Mark Butler, this is a little more technical, so maybe if you want to recap the question in a way that everyone can understand, and then go from there, that'd be great.
Yeah, the question somebody observed when I was showing the documentation results, we used little question marks in the process mapping on the wall, but we don't use them inside the final documentation. The question is, why is that? Because BPMN, or Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0, has those artifacts in it. Very simply, if a client demands that we use that, we would do that, but generally they don't care about that. They are really a waste of space, and space is a precious commodity for us when we're doing our process mapping. Plus those decision diamonds only have, 3 outcomes, and a lot of times the process will branch in 4 or 5 different directions. So in order to do that, you have to have yet a second decision diamond, or you have multiple arrows coming out of the same spot, and it's hard to follow where they go. You can't tell. It just is. We just find that it's, and generally a decision diamond really is a step in the process. That's why we use words like verify and determine. Determine if this thing is complete, because that's someone actually doing work. And we can branch from a given step in a process in as many directions as we want to go. That's the simple answer.
That's great. No, thanks for taking that. And that's going to do it for the questions. I don't see anything else coming in the chat panel now. So, moving on, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of our upcoming BPM webcast and that y'all save these dates. First is going to be tomorrow, August 18th. It's the 3rd webcast, and it will focus on what we call the process analysis, and that's the detailed work that logically follows process mapping. The fourth installment of our series is going to be August 31st, and that will be organizational change management, helping organizations fully embrace, adopt, and use new solutions, whether it's technology or just basic process-based, right? So from there, obviously, Akili is ready to work with everyone's organization, all the attendees today, with the application or implementation of BPM practices, kind of in regards to what we've explained to you today. Once again, Akili is offering everyone a 30-minute BPM advisory session, with our team, Mark Butler and Mark Freeman, who've gone through the presentation today. Myself and one of my colleagues will be following up with you very soon to schedule that advisory call, but obviously feel free to reach out to us if you guys want to go ahead and get something scheduled. Our contact information for your references is up on the screen now. Now from us here at Akili, Mark Butler, Mark Freeman, myself, Sean Granfield, and the whole team, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you soon and hope to see you again in our next webcast. Thanks, everyone.